Wednesday show. Wednesday show. Wednesday show. Wednesday show. Come and be within the know. We're now losing subscribers. We've had such an amazing week with our subscribers this week. It's absolutely insanity. Which we're going to talk about here in just a second, as soon as we start getting some people who are hopping on. Right now, it's showing a grand total of 0. But we all know that'll change within the next minute. Oh, there we go. Now it's popping up. We got 3 people who are in the chat room between either Facebook or YouTube right now. Hello, hello to everyone out there. Hopefully everyone out there is having a very good evening. Good evening. That's Phantasmic. Or not Phantasmic, Illuminations. Remember that guy at the start? When he's like, good evening. Today we join around the fire. Hi, hola, hello. Today we are coming to you from my condo, and you guys are going to be choosing the topic. Tonight we're not going to be going through, and that's copyright infringement. Yes, it is. Thank you so much. I'm still reeling from the excitement. It's been kind of a crazy. The last week has been insane. We'll talk about it in just a second here. But tonight we're going to be going through and we're going to be having it so you guys are going to be choosing the topic. We are not going to be doing our bracket series as we discussed last week. We're going to have it so we're going to switch up topics this week. Next week we're going to go back to our bracket series, and then we're going to do a different video, and we're just going to kind of go back and forth over the next few weeks here. But yeah, let's talk. Well, let's get into the show. Should we get into the show, and then we'll talk a little bit about 5K, because we have a lot to talk about with 5K. It's absolutely, actually, I think tonight after I finish the show, I might go around my complex and run a 5K in celebration of the 5K because I might as well. But yeah, we have a lot to talk about with that too, because this past week has been absolutely craziness. Like I'm completely blown away by what's going on. It is starting to finally slow down, unfortunately, but at the same time, I am so extremely grateful for everything that's happening so far. And actually, even as I speak, I can see the total. It's right below here. And we just went up another subscriber while I've been talking. I can't believe everything that's going on. Let's get this party started, though. We are going to start the 769th episode of the Wednesday show in 5, 4, 3, 2. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 769th episode of the Wednesday show. Today is May 15th, 2024, and I'm your host, as always, Brent Dodge. Hello. Today we're going to be going through and talking about Disney with you guys. You guys are going to be choosing the topic, and overall, we're just going to have a jolly good time talking about Disney. But of course, before we get to that, let's talk about our news for the week. First off, thank you everyone out there who's been joining us for our Saturday in the park. If you didn't already know, every single Saturday we do a live broadcast from someplace found throughout the Walt Disney World Resort. You never know where we're going to be, but I promise you we will always be coming to you from Disney. I truly do not know where we're going to be coming from. Like usually I do kind of at this point have my Saturday reservations set up, but going into that, so our other newest thing is annual pass holders previews for Tiana's have opened up. Well, it's not the traditional one. Now what they're doing is instead of signing up for a specific time, you're signing up for a reservation, and then you have the opportunity to get into the virtual queue exclusive for annual pass holders. So it's like a lot more complicated, but because of that, I am going to be pretty much on a very limited one reservation for the rest of the next month and a half. So I have a few reservations set up for the actual opening day of Tiana's, and I've got 2 other reservations for it. And then I have another reservation for the first day that Tiana's is open, but not for Tiana's. But that way I have the opportunity to possibly get into Tiana's at the 1 o'clock virtual queue. Very, very complicated stuff, but that is how it's going to be right now. But yeah, so I don't know where we're going to be on Saturday because I don't have a reservation for Saturday. But let's talk a little bit about 5K, because this is not Disney news, but it is personal news. Yesterday, we hit a grand total of 5,000 subscribers on my YouTube channel, which is crazy. And I want to talk about this for a minute, if you will oblige, because I want to talk a little bit about the journey of 5K, because there are people who I've talked to that say, 5K, it's not that much. Like, there's a lot of people out there who have YouTube channels that have more than 5K. Yes, that's 100% true. I'm not going to deny that whatsoever. However, when we started off this channel, it was 2019, September of 2019 to be specific. My first video ever was filmed with my old roommate from my college program, Kyle. It was me pointing out a fun fact over at the animation courtyard, and I uploaded it, and I had a whopping 2 subscribers by the end of the first day. And I was like, yes, if this is how it's going to be, I'm going to be racking in the dough in YouTube. And 5 years later, I was at 100 subscribers. And I didn't take the whole YouTube thing very seriously for quite some time. I would upload like crazy challenges. By the way, we do have some crazy challenge ideas coming up in the very near future. We're going to talk about it in just a minute here as well. We started doing crazy challenges, and I started to do a little bit more, especially when the lockdown happened and I wanted to do something. And if you watch, I did 68 videos over the course of 68 days, and you could slowly watch me go crazy because I was in this condo all by myself with no human contact for 68 straight days. And I went from, hey, let's do like a simple little video, to me literally doing videos of myself talking to myself. And then we stopped doing the videos for a while. Like, we would still do some videos here and there. And it wasn't until the 50 years, 50 days, 50 fun find series, which is still one of my favorite series that we've ever done, where leading up to the 50th anniversary of the Walt Disney World 50th celebration, I decided I was going to go through and do 50 videos in 50 days that were all about 50 seconds long, pointing out something that was around in Walt Disney World since Walt Disney World first existed. And with that series, it gave me a brand new appreciation of what I could do on this channel. And it was exhausting. It was tiring. It was other synonyms for exhaustion. But about 2 days after I finished doing those daily videos, I missed it like crazy. I was like, holy cow, I've never been so creative in my life, between that and then the lockdown when I was doing videos every single day. So it was about a week later, I decided, you know what we're going to do is we're going to start doing these daily videos once again. So in about 2021, end of 2021, maybe start of 2022, I started to do a few more videos. And slowly we got to the point of yesterday hitting 5,000 subscribers. And not only that, look at our total now, 5,086. We hit 5,000 about 26 hours ago, and we're already up another 86 subscribers. Like, isn't that crazy? Like, that's crazy. Not only that, let's point out a few other really cool, exciting fun facts that I'm completely blown away by. We hit 4,500 subscribers last Monday. Literally 9 days ago was when we hit 4,500, and here we are up 586 more subscribers from 9 days ago. So whether you are one of our new people, which I don't think you are, but if you are, hello. But if you're one of our old people, which I can see a lot of people in the chat room who are writing right now, I know you are. I want to give you guys the biggest thank you, because this is a huge number, but none of this would have happened if it was not for you guys. Because yes, it's amazing. Getting 586 subscribers in 9 days is a huge milestone for me. However, if it was not for you guys out there who have been around for the last 15 years or 14 years or 12 years or 9 years or whatever, how many years you've been here, the loyalty is so amazing. So thank you so much for helping us hit this milestone. As always, tonight's episode will go into extra innings if we get more subscribers going through here. And I have a feeling that might, because even in the last hour, we've gone up 3 more subscribers. We're at 5,083 an hour ago at 8:30. So I have a feeling that we might be going up a few more subscribers as well, because I still have a few videos out there that are doing extremely well today. They're not doing as well as they were doing yesterday when we hit the milestone, but still, this is amazing. Thank you so much. I really, truly appreciate every single one of you guys out there. You are all amazing. But let's get back into the show here. So tonight's episode is sponsored by our Patreon pals. If you're one of our Patreon pals, give us an oh yeah in the chat room so everyone knows who you are. Oh yeah, Patreon pals, you guys are appreciated. Okay, so what we're going to do tonight is you guys are going to be choosing the topic. I'm going to give you 3 options of a possible thing that you want to go through and have for our episode tonight. And depending on what you guys choose, that is going to be what we do. Okay, so here are your 3 options. We can either do a take a hike. Take a hike. Now, if you've never done a take a hike, that is when we do a virtual walkthrough of a land someplace in the Walt Disney World Resort. Always a lot of fun. Number 2, we can take a look at a specific attraction. You guys can try to decide what attraction we're going to take a look at. We'll go through the history, the fun facts, what the current attraction is, if it's still a current attraction, or if it's an extinct attraction, we can go through and do an extinct attraction as well. Or number 3, we can do an Ask the Expert where you guys just throw out your questions about anything and everything Disney. And over the next hour, we will go through and answer any and all questions that are thrown at us. You guys can start throwing your votes in right now. I'm going to give you guys about 90 seconds to vote on what topic you want. So it's either a take a hike, Ask the Expert, or a look at an attraction. You guys have about 90 seconds to throw your votes in, starting right now. But this, like that, I can't believe it. Oh, okay, and that's why I said, so some crazy challenge ideas. So he hasn't had full approval yet for this, but Frank and I were talking today, and he said that he should be able to do the Coast to Coast Crazy Challenge with me, part 2, if we get to 10,000 subscribers. So keep those subscribers coming in so we can do our take 2 of our Coast to Coast Crazy Challenge. Still one of my favorite crazy challenges that we've ever done, ever in the history of things. You guys still have about 30 seconds left to vote. We still have a lot of people who have not voted yet. Again, the options: take a hike, look at an attraction, or ask the expert. You guys have about 15 to 20 seconds left in here. It looks like we have an overwhelming. It's funny because Facebook has some votes, and then take a hike is on the one. So ask the expert, take a hike, take a hike, take a hike, take a hike, take a hike. It looks like we're going to be taking a hike tonight. Okay, now let's do one more quick poll here. Which land would you like to take a hike through? I will give you 3 options. We can either do Frontierland would be interesting. Frontierland will be one option. Number 2 will be, let's say, Toy Story Land, because I don't think we've ever done that one. And number 3 would be Frontierland. I'm thinking Frontierland would be interesting because we got all the new stuff coming, and we can also talk about the old stuff and the new stuff. And then number 3, we can say, let's say Africa. Let's say Africa over in Disney's Animal Kingdom. So again, we'll give you guys about a minute to vote for this one here. We'll give you a little bit less time. So the options are Frontierland. What was the second one I said? Frontierland. I can't even think. What was the second option I gave you? Oh, Toy Story Land. Toy Story Land, Frontierland, or Africa are the 3 options here. The Disney wish. You wish. Okay, we got a few votes are popping in there right now. Again, so it's either Africa, Toy Story Land, or Frontierland are your 3 options. I feel like I know which one people will vote for, but then I look at the chat room. I had no idea. So, okay, we're gonna give you guys about 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. We got 1 vote for Toy Story Land, 1 vote for Africa, 1 vote for Frontierland, 2 votes for Toy Story Land, and 2 votes for Frontierland. Right now, we are tied 2 for Toy Story Land and 2 for Frontierland. We are going to go to our random number generator to decide what our final number is going to be. We'll say Frontierland is going to be number 1 because it's the older land, and Toy Story Land will be number 2. Pick a number between 1 and 2.
1.
Frontierland is going to be our show for this evening. Good evening. I was thinking Toy Story Land would be kind of interesting because we have not done a Toy Story Land episode yet. But let's talk about Frontierland because Frontierland is going through so many changes right now that it's just appropriate that we do talk a little bit about what is there now and we'll talk a little bit about what is coming there in the very near future. So, ladies and gentlemen, sit back, relax, because hey, take a hike. It's time to take a hike through Frontierland over at Magic Kingdom in Walt Disney World. Now, in case you did not know, we do actually have a full book out about taking a hike or a closer look at the Magic Kingdom's Frontierland. It is going to be 130 some pages of amazing fun facts, history, and all that other fun stuff. But let's talk a little bit about the history of it before we get into the actually walking part of it. Now, when Walt Disney was creating Disneyland, he wanted to have it so there was going to be 4 themed areas based off of the pretty common tropes that were going on in the world at the time, or things that were very popular at the time. Fantasyland, because obviously a lot of his stories dealt with fantasy, so they would have Fantasyland, which would feature things like Peter Pan's Flight, Dumbo the Flying Elephant, the Carousel, and so many other classic attractions. Over in Tomorrowland, it would focus on things like the future, the idea of tomorrow and what was going to be there. A lot of the things that were going to be futuristic at that time were not futuristic whatsoever, or they caught up very quickly and became the Pastland. And then we had Adventureland, which were based off of Walt Disney's true life documentary series called the True Life Adventureland series, or True Life Adventure series. And everything was going to be focused on going to these exotic lands that most people just would not be able to travel to back in the 1950s. And then the final land was something that was very, very popular, especially back in the 1950s, because if you would go to different movie theaters, most likely there were Westerns on the screen, because Westerns were just one of the biggest things in pop culture at the time of the 1950s. So naturally, the last land was going to be a Frontierland. Now, when he created the idea of Frontierland, he would eventually say he would make it so it was the largest area in the entire Disneyland park. Ironically, now it is the smallest land in all of Disneyland park. It's kind of laughable how small it is if you've ever go to Disneyland when you think about it. So originally, it went from where Big Thunder Mountain Railroad is all the way around. New Orleans Square was part of it too, and then passed over to Critter Country as well. All of that entire area all belonged to Frontierland at one part, and now it's just like this small little itsy bitsy teeny tiny little thing. I still love Frontierland over there. However, we are not talking about Frontierland over there. We were talking about Frontierland over here at Walt Disney World. So when they decided to open up Walt Disney World, they wanted to have it so they would go into more detail with a Frontierland style park. Now, the idea of going into more detail with the specific land stems from a very simple idea. Now, as we all know, the idea of going through and having it so there was going to be this amazing area with Pirates of the Caribbean did not exist when Walt Disney World first opened up. And the reason that it did not open up was because the Imagineers thought, which is a very ridiculous thought now when you think back about it now, but back then it probably was a very real, legit thought. They figured that people who were so close to the Caribbean in Florida would not want to go on an attraction about the Caribbean. So they wanted to have it so most of the things with New Orleans Square would be featured over in Disneyland. And then because a lot of people in Florida might not ever have the chance to go out west, they would have it so there was going to be a massive land about Frontierland times. So the idea was we will create a massive, massive, massive land called Frontierland over in Walt Disney World and have it so it pays more tribute to the Old West than Disneyland's version originally paid tribute to. So the idea was set when they created Walt Disney World's Frontierland, and they had massive plans in place. And we're going to go into more of those plans as we go through our Take a Hike segment, but this is just our backstory that we're talking about right now. Oh, yeah. Thank you, Rhonda. And thank you, Jeremy. So this Jeremy right here, thank you, Jeremy. So what they would do is they were going to go through and have it so this entire Frontierland area was going to be a massive area from Liberty Square all the way down to the end of the park. Now, when the area first opened up, there were a whopping, 2 attractions. You would have the Frontierland Shooting Arcade, and in addition to that, we would also have the Country Bear Jamboree. But we also had ideas for a future that was on the horizon. See what I did there? Because of the Old West. But without any further ado, let's take a hike because we're going to talk about those future plans when we get further down into the land and focus on those plans. So let's start off with our transition from Liberty Square into Frontierland. Because if you have ever gone through and done a transition in a Disney park, then you probably know how many of these transitions are so incredibly amazing. You have things like there was blood on the so when you would go from one section of the park to the other section, this is still true today, there's usually a transition that ties those two lands together. My personal favorite is going through the Columbia Harbor House from Fantasyland into New Orleans, or Liberty Square, not New Orleans Square. And one of my second favorite is probably the one from Liberty Square into Frontierland. So when you're in Liberty Square, obviously you are on the east coast of the United States, and when you're on the east coast, you're also in this colonial times, and everything is set to the olden days of America. But when you go from the east to the west in actual America, there is something that really truly separates the east and the west in a landmark, and that is the Mississippi River. So as soon as you cross the Mississippi River, technically you're on the west coast of, or not the coast, but you're on the western part of the United States. And so to pay tribute to this transition in real life, when you're over at the Magic Kingdom and going from Liberty Square into Frontierland, you go across a little wooden bridge. And if you take a look on either side of this bridge, you will notice, especially over by the veranda bathrooms, there is a little stream. And when I say a little stream, I literally mean it's like this big of a stream. And it goes from over by the bathrooms and it goes underneath this bridge over to the other side. This little stream is actually called the Little Mississippi, and it truly transitions the West Coast from the East Coast. And as you go across this, you are now in a little bit further ahead in time. You're no longer in colonial times. Now you're in the Old West days. And you are also on a different part of America. You're no longer on the East Coast. We are now in the frontier. Yeah! So let's talk a little bit about this. Now, there are a few different things that we have to, you will notice when you first get to the western part of the park, aka into our Frontierland. First off, if you look on the right-hand side, there is a giant tower up there. If you look at the giant tower, you can find a little canteen along with a gun, because this is where some of these soldiers are on watch for different people who might be storming into their territory. Now, this is going to be a common theme as we go through the area. There are also going to be a few other themes that we will see as we go through the area as well. So just, watch out for those. So as you continue going into the land, on our left-hand side, we will see our very first attraction, and one of the oldest attractions in the park. Actually, it probably is the oldest attraction. Well, it definitely is the oldest attraction in Frontierland, because this is the Frontierland Shooting Arcade. Now, the Frontierland Shooting Arcade was originally found in Frontierland over in Disneyland, and when they decided to open up Walt Disney World, they said, you know what, we need to have the Frontierland Shooting Arcade as well. So not only is this an opening day attraction, there is also a few other things that really need to be paid tribute to here. So let's go take a look at the Frontierland Shooting Arcade. Now, when you first get in there, now you can do 35 shots for free. Actually, you can take as many shots as you want for free, because it's free. It used to cost $1 for 35 shots, but then they closed it down in 2020 with the rest of the park. And then when they reopen it in 2021, they opened it with brand new technology of not paying. That's right, completely free. So it used to be $1 to play. Now it's completely free. So every single time I am in Frontierland, well, not every time I'm in Frontierland, but a lot of times when I'm in Frontierland, I do stop by the Frontierland Shooting Arcade, and I make a goal to try to hit every single target. Now, a lot of these different targets do have a lot of really cool details in it. For instance, if you hit the Boot Hill sign, it switches over and it says for sale. If you hit the one that's got there's like a bottle of wine up there, or a bottle of the little jug there, you'll see a hand come up trying to hit it, and then the jug falls over. If you hit the one branch, the bird starts to fall down. There's so many different things, but let's take a look at my favorite detail of them all. If you take a look on the back wall, there's only one target on the back wall. It's kind of dead center in the entire room. But if you shoot this target here, it pays tribute to an old song, a classic song that you've probably heard of. Actually, if you walk through Frontierland for more than an hour, you will hear this song as one of the instrumental songs playing throughout the land. And that song is Ghost Riders in the Sky. Ghost Riders in the sky. Yippee-yi-hey, yippee-yi-ho. So if you shoot that back target, you will actually see a Ghost Rider go along the back wall as a tribute to the song Ghost Riders in the Sky. But that is not all that it has to do with Frontierland, so let's continue taking our hike. Because our next spot over is going to be the Frontierland, the pin trading station. If you go to the pin trading area, there's not a whole lot in here. However, you will see that above the door there is a sign that says the pin store is owned by Texas John Slater. Texas John Slater is an actual cowboy, very, very famous cowboy. But if you also go back to the 1950s when the Disneyland television series was going on, one of the television series they did in the Disneyland show. Now, if you don't know, the Disneyland show would it'd be Walt talking about Disneyland, but at the same time, there were episodes that focused solely on a specific show, like Davy Crockett. And one of them was a single episode about Texas John Slater. So that is a nod to not just a real person, but also an episode of the Disneyland television series. Besides that, not a lot of really cool details inside of the shop. You can buy lots of pins there. There used to be 2 really cool Hidden Mickeys there, but unfortunately, they switched out the inside part of the story about 5 or 6 years ago. And when they did that, they got rid of the one really cool Hidden Mickey that I used to like. It used to be in the top right back corner of the store. And that disappeared, and so it did a little piece of my heart. So let's continue on our walk through Frontierland, because if we exit the pin store and we go straight across the street, we will find our next spot, and the next spot is going to be a store. Now this store is called Big Al's, which is a nod to Big Al from the Country Bear Jamboree. Now, one of the things that I do like to point out to people about the Big Al sign is if you look at the Big Al sign, there is a picture of Big Al on there. Makes sense. The store is called Big Al's. But if you turn around and you look the other way, you'll find the Country Bear Jamboree sign. Right now it's not there. But in the past, you could find the Country Bear Jamboree sign. And on the sign, you could find 3 of the Country Bears. And one of them was Big Al. Putting Big Al in a very, very, very exclusive club, because Big Al was one of 3, that's right, 3 characters ever to have it. So their face was on a sign for a shop and an attraction inside the Magic Kingdom. The only other 2 that had this distinction, and actually right now Big Al was the only one until they took down the Country Bear Jamboree sign, was Brer Rabbit. He was found on the sign for Splash Mountain. He could also be found on the sign for Splash Down Photos, the spot where you could actually go through and get your picture at the end. So ironically, 2 of these were actually found inside of Frontierland. And the last one was actually Mickey Mouse. He could be found at Mickey's PhilharMagic. And then he also used to be found on the Mickey Star Trader sign. And unfortunately, they switched over that sign design at one point, and he was no longer there. So it still says Mickey Star Traders, and now you can see the Mickey Mouse ears, but it's no longer a picture of Mickey Mouse. So unfortunately, right now, we have nothing. By the way, while we go through here, if you guys have any questions, start throwing the questions in the comments. I will try to go through and answer questions as we go through here as well. I'm going to take a quick drink here because my mouth is going a million miles a minute. Okay, so continuing our journey. So we've got Big Al's there. Now, Big Al's, one of my favorite things about it is Big Al's is supposed to be shaped like a hunter shack for people who might go out and hunt for bears. So I always found that to be very, very funny that we have it so we can actually buy merchandise inside of Big Al's, but it's actually supposed to be designed around people who are trying to shoot Big Al. Now, across the way, we have the Country Bear Jamboree. Now, like I said, when the park first opened up, there was only 2 attractions that were found inside of Frontierland. There's arguably a third, but we'll kind of get into that in just a few minutes here. But there were 2 shops that were found inside of Frontierland. And the next one is one that we have gone into so much detail about in the past, but we're going to bring up a few different things about it right now. And that is the Country Bear Jamboree. Now, the Country Bear Jamboree is considered Walt's last laugh because it was the last project that any of the Imagineers actually talked to Walt Disney about before he would pass away in 1966. So when Walt Disney was going through and visiting the different Imagineers before the entire, well, until his death, he stopped by Mark Davis's office, and when he was in there, he was like asking him what he was working on. He was like, "Oh, I'm working on that Country Bear Jamboree show," and he was looking at the different caricatures of the bears, and he started to laugh. And he said, "That's a great job, Mark." And then he would pass away a few days later. So that was the last time that anyone ever heard Walt Disney laugh at one of the projects. So it did become known as Walt's Last Laugh. Now, originally, this was actually supposed to be at the Mineral King Ski Resort that was going to be over in California. Unfortunately, those plans did fall apart. But luckily for us, the idea of the Country Bear Jamboree stuck around until eventually they would open it up here at Walt Disney World. Now, when it would open up the Walt Disney World on October 1st, 1971, it actually held the distinction of being the very first ever attraction to open up at Walt Disney World before eventually opening up at Disneyland as well. It would open up in 1973 in Disneyland on March 24th, my birthday. Not my actual birthday. 12 years later, I would be born, but still, I shared a birthday with Country Bear Jamboree, kind of. And just the Disneyland version, the one that's no longer with us. But still, we're going to completely ignore that and just accept the fact that I had a birthday with the Country Bear Jamboree. Okay, so the Country Bear Jamboree would feature several different bears in there, along with a few other characters. We would also have 4 different characters that were not bears. They would be mainly found on the walls, along with Sammy, who was found on the raccoon hat on top of Henry's hat in the final scene. Now, the Country Bear Jamboree would go through so many different changes throughout the years. It would actually start off with the original show. Eventually, in the 1980s, they would switch it up a little bit because they figured some people might be getting sick of the show. So they brought in a brand new Christmas special, and the Christmas special actually went from the mid-1980s all the way up until 2004 when it would have its last run. In between this, they also had the Vacation Hoedown, which would feature a brand new set of songs that the Bears would play, and they would also get completely different props. Now, eventually what would happen is the Country Bear Jamboree, although extremely popular, it started to fade in popularity, and eventually the Imagineers and Disney said it just doesn't it's costing us too much money to have it so we're constantly changing out these outfits of the bears and having it so it's down for a few weeks while we do complete refurbs and then bringing it back and hoping that we'll have enough people going to the show to really make it worth our while to be closing it down for a while. And because of that, they finally said, you know what, we're just going to stick with one show and one show only. So from 2005 all the way up until earlier this year, the Country Bear Jamboree was only the original show, but even that, it was like a 6-minute shortened version of the original show. So it wasn't even the original show that we all knew and loved. So when they would go through and shorten it down, eventually what would happen is they would say, maybe, just maybe, we should have it so we bring in a brand new show as well, still featuring the Country Bears, but give them a little bit more of a little bit of an upgrade, especially with the songs that they sing. So later on this year, we don't have a specific date yet, but later on this year, we will see the brand new version of the Country Bear Jamboree, featuring the same bears that we know and love, but just singing completely different songs. Again, if you guys have any questions, throw the questions in there. Otherwise, I think that you guys might be a captive audience tonight. Maybe, I don't know. But the Country Bear Jamboree is a classic attraction, and that's not all that we have to talk about with the Country Bear Jamboree. Because, like I said, there are 3 animals that are in the show that are, well, there's 4, but there's 3 specific animals that are in the show that have been not just in the Country Bear Jamboree, but they've been on the other side of the wall as well. I am talking about Max, Melvin, and Buff, the 3 heads that are on the wall. So not only could you see these guys inside the Country Bear Jamboree, but at one point you could see them on the other side at the exit of the attraction at a place called the Mile Long Bar. Now, the Mile Long Bar did not serve any alcohol, but it was a very, 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 very quick service location. And when I say very, very, very quick service location, I mean we would have just snacks and drinks, and that was it. There was nothing else that you could really get there. However, it looked like an old saloon bar, and if you looked on either side of the bar, there were mirrors there. So if you looked down one way, because of the mirrors that were over here and over here, it would make it so it gave you the illusion that it was going on and on and on, making it a mile-long bar. See? Makes sense. So while you would go through and you would have this mile-long bar, on top of the wall, you would also have Max, Melvin, and Buff, and they would be sitting there interacting with the guest. Not really interacting, but they would be sitting there talking to the guest and making observations about the guest, and the observations were always the same observations. So whether there was a person with a funny hat or not in the room, they would bring up the person with the funny hat and point it out to everyone else. Eventually, what would happen is the mile-long bar would merge together with the quick service restaurant that is located right next to it. So let's talk a little bit about the quick service location that's right next to it. Right now, it's called Pecos Bill's Tall Tale Inn and Cafe. At one point, it was called Pecos Bill's Cafe. Eventually, they would merge together and they would become a bigger restaurant altogether, and actually one of the best themed restaurants inside of the Magic Kingdom, in my personal opinion. Mainly due to the fact that the backstory that's going on inside here, I think, is just such a well done backstory. What's that? Oh, I forgot to turn off my TV. I had it like I thought it was on mute when I was getting ready for the show, but I guess it's like 1%. So where were we at? We were at Pecos Bill's Tall Tale and Cafe. So with Pecos Bill's Tall Tale and Cafe, one of my favorite things about this restaurant is the backstory that's going on. Because if you know anything about Pecos Bill was a tall tale character. You could actually find him in one of the old Disney movies, Melody Time. And in the film, he has it so he is in love with Slewfoot Sue, and he also has a horse named Widowmaker. And that's pretty much the only thing we really know about the three characters. It's a very short segment. It actually had its own segment way, way, way back in the day, even before it would appear in this package film. I don't think that's that loud, but at the same time, I can hear it pretty well, and I couldn't hear it earlier. So I'm surprised that it took me 37 minutes to actually be able to hear the TV. Hopefully you guys can't hear it, and it's not distracting you at all. It's just distracting me. But let's continue. So when you're actually in there, there are several different tall tale characters that are found inside of this restaurant. And the way that this actually plays out is the idea that because Pecos Bill is a tall tale character, he's the guy who shot out all the stars in the sky. So eventually Texas would become the Lone Star State because there was only one star that he had left out. If you hear wolves howling, that's because of Pecos Bill. There are so many different tall tales that go with Pecos Bill, but because he was a tall tale character, he decided that he was going to open up a brand new restaurant and invite all of his tall tale friends in with him so they could come visit it. And it kind of became like the Planet Hollywood of the tall tale world. So instead of having, so there's all these different things from different celebrities kind of scattered throughout. Instead, we would have a bunch of different things that were from different people that were tall tale characters kind of scattered throughout. So when you first walk into the lobby, if you take a look at the doorway that goes into the dining area, there's a massive axe there. This is Paul Bunyan's axe. Included on it is actually an engraving that says something along the lines of, Pecos Bill, good luck, your buddy, Paul Bunyan. If you continue going through the restaurant, you can find so many different characters that we all know and love from different tall tale stories, including Texas John Slater, who we talked about earlier. Including in that, you can also find Slewfoot Sue and Widowmaker, the two people that actually dealt with him. Johnny Appleseed, you can find his tin hat. Well, it's not tin. It's a pot that he would also wear as a hat, as he made he planted apple seeds throughout the country. And in addition to that, we can also find characters like Davy Crockett and George E. Russell. So many different characters as you go through there. All of them have their own little section pretty much in the store, or within the restaurant. So while you're going through, you can kind of start to put together all the different pieces. But before we move on to our next thing, let's talk a little bit about my favorite detail here. If you've been with us and we've talked about Frontierland in the past, I can almost guarantee you've heard this story before, but I still absolutely love it, is if you go to the very back corner of the entire restaurant in the left-hand side, there is a small little room there. And if you take a look at the small little room, it is kind of a little box followed by a little other box. Does that make sense? It's like an L-shaped room. I could have just said that. That makes it sound so much easier. If you walk into the room right where the L marks the mark, where it goes around the corner, you can find a shelf up on the wall. And if you take a look at the shelf on the wall, you can actually find a letter from George Russell recounting his days of one of the days when he had a shooting competition with Davy Crockett. So if you actually go through and you read the story, the only way you can really read it is if you step on a chair, take a picture, and you can read it on your phone. That's how I did it, at least. It goes through and it goes point by point by point of the actual Davy Crockett episode in the Disneyland series, where there was a shooting competition between Davy and someone else, and Davy shot a bullseye on top of a bullseye, and then that guy shot a bullseye on top of his bullseye, and then he shot the bullseye on top of the guy's bullseye on top of his bullseye. Overall, really cool kind of going through there and taking a look at some of the details. But let's leave Pecos Bills and we'll head towards the other part of Frontierland, which is going to be over by the river. Down by the river. That's not a song. So let's first talk about the first attraction that would open up in Frontierland after the park would open up. By the way, I'm going to point those out right now. You guys have already earned yourself some extra innings. We started at 5,086. We were currently at 5,088. I had been trying to talk fast because I was like, oh, we might not get to help this through an hour. I'm going to start to talk a little bit slower, but we still have a lot to talk about. So I apologize if I start like babbling on and on and on and on and on, but that's what I always do. But we were trying to get to your questions too. So if you guys have any questions, again, just start throwing those questions into the comments below. Okay, so we are going to talk a little bit about the first attraction that would open in Frontierland after the Magic Kingdom opened up, and that would be Tom Sawyer Island. Now, much like Disneyland, Tom Sawyer Island was something that was originally planned to be in the park. It just did not open with the park. And much like Disneyland, it did not open immediately. It opened up a few years later. So over in Disneyland, it became a pretty big hit. It was actually the first area that was completely, scratch that, not the first, it was the only area in the entire park that was designed completely by Walt Disney. So when they opened up Walt Disney World, they said, we have to have a Tom Sawyer Island over here as well. We just can't have the exact one that Walt Disney created for Disneyland. So they went through and they created their own. But at the same time, what they did over here, amazing. So if you know anything about the story of Tom Sawyer was created by a man named Samuel Langhorne Clemens, or Mark Twain, as we all know him as. And when Mark Twain created the characters of Tom Sawyer, it took place just down the road of Marceline, Missouri, where Walt Disney actually grew up at. So when we would go through and read the stories, or when Walt Disney would read the stories of Tom Sawyer, he felt a strong connection to the character because it was very similar to what he actually experienced as a child as well. So when we got over to the island, there are several different things that you can find here. There's 3 tunnels. One of them is an escape tunnel. The other 2 are caves. One of them is a mystery mine, and the other one was Injun Joe's cave. Up until a few years ago, they switched it, and now it's just the cave. It doesn't say anything in there. But when you go through these different caves, there's 2 of them that are very straightforward on where you go. And then the one that's in the middle of the entire island is the one that has a lot of different twists and turns. No matter what, you're still going to be going the same way, but you can take different paths, and it makes it more entertaining, in my personal opinion. But in addition to going through the caves, we have a few different fun facts on this island that we need to talk about, because there is a small island and there is a big island. So let's talk about things that are on the big island, which is going to be the northern island, aka the one that you don't land on, but the one that has the fort. Now, the fort is called Fort Langhorne, and this is actually a nod to Samuel Langhorne Clemens, aka Mark Twain. Now, as a tribute to Mark Twain, they decided to have a few different tributes to him on the island, with this one being the most prominent. So if you're there, you can see Fort Langhorne. However, Langhorne is not spelled the same way that Mark Twain would actually spell his middle name. This one is missing the E. This one's missing the E. His name has an E at the end. This one does not have an E at the end. So it is one of the references to to Mark Twain. There's also a crate that you can find over there that says ship to S.L. Clemens. And then it's got his actual address that was over in Missouri. In addition to these 2 references, we do have a few other really cool references that you can find throughout the island. But some of my favorites, let's do 2 of them, because we want to get to Big Thunder Mountain Railroad and Splash Mountain / talk a little bit about Tiana's as well. So 2 of my favorite things that you have on here is, one, there is Becky Thatcher. Now, Becky Thatcher was Tom Sawyer's love interest in the books, The Many Adventures of Tom Sawyer. And when we would go through and we'd read about her, it was one of those that Tom Sawyer always said, no, Becky Thatcher, I absolutely hate her. And she absolutely hated him. But at the same time, you could tell that they were secretly in love with each other. Now, if you go to one end of the island, the ones that facing towards Liberty Square, you can find a whitewashed fence. This is actually a tribute, obviously, to Mark Twain, where he tricked all the boys to whitewash the fence for him. But here you can also find a thing that says Finn was here, and then you can also find a thing that says Tom loves Becky written in the paint. That is not the only time that you can find a reference to Tom Sawyer and Becky Thatcher. If you also go up to the very top of the fort, that's the very top of the hill on the small island, you can find a little steering wheel there, and the steering wheel looks out towards Splash Mountain / Tiana's Bayou Adventure. If you take a look at the back side of the pole that it's actually held on, you can see a heart is carved there with the initials TS plus BT for Tom Sawyer plus Becky Thatcher. Final one we're going to talk about while we're here on Tom Sawyer Island is if you go down the hill over to Harper's Mill. Harper's Mill is named after two different people. One of them is Harper from the book, and the other one is named after Harper, an Imagineer. Both people are recognized in the same name for this mill. Let me get another drink. I'm dying of thirst right now. So inside of Harper's Mill, there is a nod to a Silly Symphony cartoon. Now, we all know Silly Symphonies, and just in case you don't, a Silly Symphony was a type of cartoon that Walt Disney created around the same time that he created Mickey Mouse. So the idea of these Silly Symphonies was they have it so they would go through and they would use more technology as they would go through the years to help evolve how cartoons were created. Eventually, this would also help them with creation of things like Snow and the Seven Dwarfs, Pinocchio, etc., etc., etc. Now, one of these cartoons was called The Old Mill. The Old Mill was going to be the first time ever that the multiplane camera, the little, not little, it's a massive machine, but the machine that would help make cartoons look like they had depth. They would have a paper at the end here that would be the complete background of the entire scene, and then something that was a little bit closer in the scene, closer, and then you would have whatever your characters were actually walking on. So when you would look through the camera at the top, it gave it a bunch of depth, and it made it look like it was a little more of an abstract painting. It also made it look like when you're looking through an actual camera, and you can see that those mountains are way off in the distance and not really close up, and that's just kind of how they use the multiplane camera. Now, when they would create Tom Sawyer Island here, they wanted to pay a tribute to the Old Mill, the cartoon, and the way that they did this is extremely clever, and I'm really bummed because it's not working right now like it usually does. But there is an actual mill, an actual water wheel that goes through, and if you go inside, the gears are turning all around. The water wheel hasn't had the water up high enough lately to actually have it so it's turning, so it has not been working for like the last 6 months, unfortunately. But when it is working, you can see the gears are turning. While the gears are turning, you can hear a bird chirping, and the bird chirping is at the one spot where the things will not go into, because it's like the cartoon where when it's going around, there's one spot where the birds are sitting, and it's the only spot that the actual, I don't even know what that's called, like the cog can't go into the hole to like destroy the machine or destroy the birds. So we have a bird that's there. He's chirping much like the chirping happens in the cartoon. In addition to that, there is an owl up on the ceiling, and he is hooting like the owl does in the cartoon. And then the gears are turning, making the same noise. So when you actually put all the noise together, it actually plays the song that is at the start of the Old Mill. Overall, one of the most overlooked details in all of Frontierland, and I absolutely love it. I love to point it out to people, but unfortunately, it has not been around for about 6 months now because that water is not up high enough. And I'm hoping after all these different refurbs are going on in Frontierland, maybe, just maybe, we'll finally have it back. Okay, let's take the raft back over to the other side of the island because we still have 3 things to talk about, including our transition over to the other side. So let's talk a little bit about Big Thunder Mountain Railroad. Now, Big Thunder Mountain Railroad, as we talked about earlier, was the idea of this massive idea for Frontierland. Because like I said, they wanted to put all this money into Frontierland over in Walt Disney World because they figured most people can't make their way out west. And the way that they could go about doing this was by creating a very, very, very detailed attraction, which would be called, not Big Thunder Mountain Railroad, it would be called Thunder Mesa. Now, Thunder Mesa would actually be 3 attractions all rolled into one. One of them would be a nice, relaxing ride through the Old West, and it was lots of fun, and not too much excitement was going on, but you would go by these different scenes that dealt with the Old West. Then there was another attraction that was pretty much like the wildest ride in the wilderness, where guests could go on, and they could go on a wild ride through the wilderness in the form of Big Thunder Mountain Railroad. Then the final one was going to be a boat ride that took you again through different scenes of the Wild West, and eventually you would have a massive drop at the end. Kind of sound familiar? Now, altogether, these 3 attractions would be called Thunder Mesa, and they would actually have it so there was going to be different bits and pieces of different storylines going on in all three attractions. And the only way you could really put all the pieces together was by riding all three different attractions. So it was a great way to get people to go on three different attractions and learn more about putting a story together. Now, the reason this was never created was because in 1971, Disney was convinced, they were convinced that no one would want to go on an attraction about the Caribbean because you were right down the street from the Caribbean. We talked about that earlier. So they decided not to have Pirates of the Caribbean in the attraction when the park first opened up. Now, one of the last things that Walt Disney ever talked about in the television show before he passed away was Pirates of the Caribbean. It's a great episode. If you ever have seen it, you know what I'm talking about. If you've never seen it, search for it on YouTube. It might be on Disney Plus even. It is one of the coolest things ever, because he goes through with Julie Rimes, the very first ever Disneyland ambassador, and they go through and he shows her all the different models for Pirates of the Caribbean. It's really, really cool. If you've never seen it before, I highly, highly recommend checking it out. But anyways, because that was the last thing that Walt Disney ever talked about really on TV, a lot of people were saying, well, where's this Pirates of the Caribbean attraction that Walt Disney was talking about? And they said, oh, well, we figured that you guys wouldn't want to see it here because you can just, do a 2-hour drive and you can go to the Caribbean yourself. And Disney quickly realized that we made a huge mistake and we need to bring Pirates of the Caribbean over to Walt Disney World. So if you've ever gone Pirates of the Caribbean over at Disneyland and you know how elaborate it is and how amazing it is, that's because they had a long time to make that one. This one, however, would open up not even a year and a half after the park opened up. It would open up on March 18th of 1973. So that would eventually open up a year and a half after the park opened up. And when that happened, they put so much time and effort into that attraction that they no longer had the funding for Thunder Mesa. So when they took the funding from that, they said, well, unfortunately, Thunder Mesa just isn't going to be a thing anymore. So they put that on the back burner, and they're trying to figure out what they're going to do with this land in Frontierland, because at this point, we still only have 3 attractions now. We've got the Frontierland Shooting Arcade, Country Bear Jamboree, and Tom Sawyer Island, but we don't have the big thrilling attraction that we originally intended to have there. So eventually, in the mid-1970s, they decided that what they were going to do was they were going to build a brand new attraction called Big Thunder Mountain Railroad and base it off the roller coaster that was going to be part of Thunder Mesa. So when they were going to build this attraction, they kind of scaled it down from what the original plan was, but they decided while they were building it that the best thing to do was to open up at Disneyland first, because that's where all the Imagineers were, so it'd be easier for them to build it. And it also gave them an idea of how to go about making the track. And if you've ever done Disneyland's version compared to Walt Disney World's, a lot of people will say Disneyland has a better track. Other people will say Walt Disney World has a better track. We can all agree that the last lift hill with the dynamite in Disneyland is a lot cooler than the one that we have at Walt Disney World. However, both tracks are the exact same track. They're just a complete mirrored image of each other. There's nothing different about them besides the fact that they're just a mirrored track. That's just a little fun fact for you. So Thunder Mesa was scaled down to Big Thunder Mountain Railroad, and they opened up in 1980 here at the Magic Kingdom. Now, right down the road from that, about 12 years later, we would have our final attraction that was going to be added into Frontierland at Magic Kingdom, and that would be Splash Mountain. Now, Splash Mountain, of course, would go through some changes throughout the years, but let's first talk about the change that occurred because of Splash Mountain. Because, like I said earlier, there were 2 attractions in Frontierland on opening day. However, technically, there was a third, and the third was the Walt Disney World Railroad. There was a Frontierland train station that sat right where Splash Mountain currently sits, and when they were going through and making Splash Mountain, they had to move that entire area, and the reason they moved it was they moved it over a little bit closer to where Big Thunder Mountain Railroad was when the construction for Big Thunder Mountain Railroad was going on. So the Frontierland train station would move over, and then, of course, we had room now for Splash Mountain. Now, if you ever had the opportunity to go on Splash Mountain, it was open from 1992 all the way until early last year. And let's do a quick little history of that attraction before we go into what's coming up in the very near future. So, any questions yet? Or I'm just rambling. Sometimes I think I talked to someone that I work with who says that they watch the Wednesday show afterwards, and they're like, because they can't see the chat when they watch it later on, and they're like, sometimes you just start asking, like, does anyone have any questions out there? And they're like, is there anyone even watching sometimes? Because sometimes I feel like and I was like, sometimes I think I'm just rambling so much that people are like, I'm just going to let this guy ramble in the background of my computer and I'm just going to be quiet here. And I feel like that might be happening tonight. We've got people who are talking. We just have a lot of people who are probably listening more, or people who just completely forgot that I'm sitting in the other room of their house and they're, getting ice cream. Ooh, ice cream sounds good right now. So Splash Mountain would open up in 1992 here at Walt Disney World. However, it would open up a few years earlier in 1989 over in Disneyland. Now, the reason they would open up in Disneyland was because back in 1970s, they decided they're going to have a brand new attraction in Tomorrowland, taking the place of where the Carousel of Progress at. And that attraction was going to be called America Sings. Now, America Sings would take guests through different showrooms of different characters that were all animal-based, and these animals would go through and they would sing different patriotic songs. And while they would go through and sing these different patriotic songs, it was a great way to celebrate the bicentennial of America. However, after about 10 years, they're like, we can't really continue to celebrate the bicentennial because it's been about 10 to 15 years since the bicentennial passed, and we need to figure out something else that's going on here. So while they're going through and trying to figure out what they're going to put the place of in that area, because it started off as Carousel of Progress, and they're putting America Sings. Eventually, it would become Innoventions, which we would have over at Epcot as well, but that's completely besides the point. So they're closing that down, and in the early 1980s, we would have it so there was a complete turnover in the head of the Walt Disney Company, with Michael Eisner becoming the brand new CEO, with Frank Wells being the CFO. Now, when these two would come in, one of the things they said was, hey, you guys should have a flume ride, because flume rides are popular at a lot of different water parks or a lot of different parks, amusement parks. So we might as well have it so we bring in this attraction over here as well. And we should have it at Disneyland. And all the Imagineers said, no, we're not going to do a flume ride. Like, we don't do just Cheap Tricks. I want you to want me. That's Cheap Trick. That's a band. But I want you to, I haven't thought about that song in years. But anyways, they said, we don't want to do Cheap Tricks. Like, we need to have a story. And one day, while Tony Baxter, an Imagineer who also created Big Thunder Mountain Railroad, while he was stuck in traffic, he was thinking about the America Sings things. He was also thinking about a flume ride, and he realized how he could bring them all together. And that was by having it so he married the characters that kind of looked like the characters from a movie from the 1940s called Song of the South, and bringing them into a flume ride type attraction, which you would call, no, not Splash Mountain, the Zippity Doo-Dah River Run, of course. So he pitched the idea to Michael Eisner in a famous meeting where Michael Eisner brought in his 15-year-old son, and the 15-year-old son made all the ideas, or all the agreements of what was going to be in the park. And some of the ideas they had were Star Tours along with this Zippity Doo-Dah River Run. Now, when he would pitch this idea of the Zippity Doo-Dah River Run to Michael Eisner and his son, Michael Eisner said, do you think it's a good idea? His son said, that would be the coolest ride ever. And he approved it. However, what he did say was, it shouldn't be called the Zippity Doo-Dah River Run, not because of anything with Song of the South, but because Disney had just started a brand new production label called Touchstone Pictures, and their very first film in there was a movie called Splash, starring Tom Hanks. And Splash was a huge hit, and because of that, Michael Eisner said it should be called Splash Mountain, because it might make people think about the movie Splash, and it might cause them to go on the ride more often. It's a weird idea, but at the same time, Splash Mountain does sound better than Zippity Doo-Dah River Run. Although Zippity Doo-Dah River Run is kind of fun to say. Like, if you're sitting at home right now, just say Zippity Doo-Dah River Run, because it's a fun word to say. So the attraction was approved. It opened up in Disneyland back in 1989, and then eventually what they would do is in 1992, we would open it up here at Walt Disney World. Now, when it would open up at Walt Disney World, it became a huge hit, and we're going to go through and just talk about a few little fun facts about it, because we did a massive episode about this about 17 months ago, about when we were covering the end of Splash Mountain. We went through and we did a walkthrough of the entire attraction. But before we continue, let's do a few little fun facts about them. So number one of my favorite details that most people just completely forgot about is when you are going down the hill, you are returning to the briar patch because Brer Rabbit was tricking Brer Fox into throwing him down into the briar patch because the briar patch is where he grew up. Now, one of the things that you could actually tell about this when you're going on the ride is when you went up the first hill, you went past like the little garden area, and then when you were going past the little garden area, you could see Brer Bear's house on the right-hand side, and across the way on the left-hand side, right next to the hill, there was a sign that said Brer Rabbit with a little door there, along with the mailbox. This was indicating to us right off the bat that, hey, this is where he lives. This is where we're eventually going to go as well. But most people just never picked up on that little detail. Another detail that I've always loved was up on the birdhouse that was up on the tree right in that same area. Instead of having an animal on it, which most people have little weather vanes with animals on it, the bird's weather vane was actually a person, which I just always thought was a very, very funny thing. When we would actually go through the ride, the very first fall that we would go down, or the first fall we would go down was called the Slippin' Falls, which was a nice little pun. I always like a good pun. So Slippin' Falls was the name of that. And then eventually you would go into the next room where all the different characters were fishing. And one of the characters was a worm on a hook, and he had a little straw hat on. And I always liked to look at him. But that's enough of our Splash Mountain thing. So we will be getting a brand new attraction called Tiana's Bayou Adventure coming out next month. We talked a little bit about it at the start of the show here, but Tiana's Bayou Adventure is scheduled to go next month. By the way, in case anyone is out there is wondering why we are continuing to talk, even though we're past our time that we usually end, we are currently up 3 subscribers from where we were at the start of the show. So we're just going to keep on going until I finish here. Also, because we are getting closer to the end, if you do have any questions about Frontierland at all, throw them to the comments now. And that way, when we finish here, I can go through your questions instead of being like, okay, any questions? Any questions? No, let's go. Okay, so eventually you would exit out of Splash Mountain into the splashdown photos. One of my favorite things about the splashdown photos is if you looked around the store, there were different negatives of different pictures that were kind of hanging there. If you took a lot of those different, if you took a look at a lot of these different things, a lot of them were actual pictures from the movie Song of the South. I remember the Splash Mountain MGM did not know that it was why he named Splash Mountain. Yeah, the Splash Mountain, or the Splash Fountain, used to be found right over by the Studio Backlot Tour. Really cool fountain. But yeah, that's why they named Splash Mountain, which I always found really funny. So yeah, you would see the different things inside the Splashdown photos, and then let's continue our hike by going around the corner, and we're going to make our way towards our final destination, which is Adventureland, because you guys chose to do a hike through Frontierland, and we started off with a transition from Adventureland into Frontierland, or I'm sorry, from Liberty Square into Frontierland. So it just makes sense that we're going to end the episode on our transition from Frontierland into Adventureland. Now, a lot of people out there don't really realize the transition that's going on from Frontierland to Adventureland, but there is one, and it's a very, very cool one that most people just walk on by without ever really paying attention to. Now, if you've ever gone by the Pirate's Adventure, there's the Pirate's Adventure. It's the Treasure of the Seven Seas. You can go in there. Captain Jack Sparrow gives you all these different missions that you have to run around Adventureland trying to do. And technically, it's technically in the land that's like the no man's land between Adventureland and Frontierland. And yes, it's part of Pirates Plaza in Adventureland, but it's also partly in Frontierland. And I know what you're thinking. How does this actually connect with anything at all? Well, let's explain it. So originally, before this was the Pirate's Adventure, this used to be called the Crow's Nest. It was a gift shop that sold different films. So if you ever went to the park back when film was around, instead of just having your cell phone with you, you could be able to go in there and you could buy cameras, you could buy film, you could buy different camera equipment. But it was called the Crow's Nest, and the sign for the Crow's Nest is still there. It's just kind of torn down, and now it says a Pirate's Adventure on there. But it still lives. And the reason that we have a Crow's Nest in Frontierland and in Adventureland is because of Davy Crockett. Because, yes, the Pirates of the Caribbean belong in Adventureland. However, Davy Crockett also battled against river pirates in the famous Davy Crockett series. In fact, if you ever go on the Liberty Bell Riverboat, which technically is in, this is going to be even more confusing, so just bear with me. Technically, it is a Liberty Square ride. However, it does go around the rivers of America and enters into Frontierland. So then it's a Frontierland ride, but then it eventually gets back into Liberty Square and makes it a Liberty Square ride. I know, confusing. But while you're on that, you go past an area where you can actually see or hear the river pirates inside of Tom Wilson's Inn, aka it's a cave, and there you go. Wait, I hear river pirates, and then you can hear them making a bunch of noise out in the cave. Also, just complete side fun facts about this area. One, there is a boat out front that is part of the old attraction that used to be found around that area, the Mike Fink's keel boats. So you actually used to be able to go on those boats and go around Tom Sawyer Island as well there. And then also, if you take a look at the clothesline, you'll find different pirates outfits there. All of the pirates outfits there are not technically, they are actual Pirates of the Caribbean cast member outfits. So if you look at those clothes and then you go to Pirates of the Caribbean, you will notice that the clothes on that clothesline are the same clothes that the Pirates of the Caribbean cast members will wear. Completely side note there, though. So in the Davy Crockett episode, Davy Crockett and the River Pirates, he eventually goes down the Mississippi River, where he does a race sailing down the Mississippi River against a guy named Mike Fink, Mike Fink's keelboats. When he does this, there are also river pirates that are involved that are trying to rob them on the river boat. So because of that, because Davy Crockett, and because actually that was a real thing, there were these river pirates in the Caribbean and in frontier times on the rivers going through and trying to steal monies and different jewels from different people that are on the rivers. They decided to have it so when you are going from Frontierland, the transition is this idea of the crow's nest, because crow's nest would look out for different pirates in Adventureland, but it would also turn around and look for the pirates that might be the river pirates in Frontierland. And that ends our transition from Frontierland to Adventureland. Yay! Okay, anyone out there have any questions at all? We just threw a lot of information at you within the last 98 minutes. Let's see our subscriber count here. We'll go through, we'll answer a few questions, so if anyone has any questions. 5,089. Oh, yeah. Yeah, we just threw a lot of information at you. Even, what's your favorite attraction in Frontierland? Or if there was an attraction that you wanted to add to Frontierland, what would it be? I always wanted to see Thunder Mesa. I would love to see Thunder Mesa. If you look when you're in line for Big Thunder Mountain Railroad, there is a picture of Tony Baxter up on the shelves up there, and then there's also a picture of Thunder Mesa. It's like some of the concept art for what Big Thunder Mountain Railroad / Thunder Mesa was going to be. But if you look in the background, there are 4 different mountains, and the 4 different mountains are actually the 4 different peaks of Big Thunder Mountain Railroad around the world, which I think is pretty cool too. I love how you can see the transition in the walkways between park sections. The canoes were fun. Yes, the canoes. They should bring the canoes back. Actually, maybe not with the alligators. I talked to someone not that long ago at my job, and they were talking about how they went kayaking on one of these rivers in Florida, and I was like, did you die? Because I don't know if I would actually trust the no. And they said that they could see gators. They took pictures and they had gators out there as well, which to me it just sounds terrifying, absolutely terrifying. Oh, look at this, 5,090. We actually might hit 5,100 tonight, which is crazy because we hit 5,000 yesterday. I really can't believe I can't believe how those numbers are going up. It's absolutely insane. Remember the Big Thunder Marvel comics I enjoyed? Yes, those were really well done. I actually think so. If they would go through and make a Western movie about Big Thunder Mountain Railroad, I would not complain. If they could do what they did with Pirates of the Caribbean or the new Haunted Mansion, I think those two were both extremely well done when it comes to creating park attractions or park movies about park attractions. I think that Big Thunder Mountain Railroad has a great potential for a great storyline but it has to be done right. And I would love to see a movie about it someday, but those comics were really well done. They also had comics for Figment and the Enchanted Tiki Room, and I feel like there was one, oh, Haunted Mansion had one, right? I think, maybe? Yes. Oh, the Museum of the Weird, which was Haunted Mansion. Yeah, I loved those comics, were so well done. Also, if you are interested in anything else with Frontierland, this is the book I wrote. A closer look at the Magic Kingdom's Frontierland. Front dodge, that's me. See, wait. See, my name and my name. A name so nice they said it twice. Yeah, it goes through. We go through a lot of facts about Frontierland. So if you ever, we got to take a canoe over the water bridge. Disney Institute was fun. Oh, that's cool. That's very cool. Okay, any other questions out there? We will see if we'll do 2 more questions if anyone out there has any questions. Otherwise, we will be wrapping this up here. We do have quite a few people who are watching right now. It says between Facebook and YouTube. Just people are observing tonight, which is fine. Absolutely fine. I love Frontierland. Frontierland was one of those lands that I remember growing up. I always liked Big Thunder Mountain Railroad. I always thought that was a great attraction. I always have loved Tom Sawyer Island. Tom Sawyer Island is one of those things that I actually was over there yesterday. It's one of those places where I just love to go over there because every time I go over there, I just feel like a kid again. I feel like a kid most times of my every day. But there's something about Tom Sawyer Island that just brings out the kid in me even more so, and running around there. But I was never like, it was not my favorite land in Magic Kingdom. And then when I started working on the book for it, I fell more and more in love with the land until eventually, I was like, oh, this is the coolest land. Like there's so much detail. There's so much more stuff than what we just talked about. I could go on for another 3 hours about this, or we could just read the book to you guys. I saw they filed the permits for the Beyond Big Thunder Mountain project. Super excited. I'm very excited for that. I was talking to someone the other day, and they were like, yeah, I don't think it's going to be that good. I'm not that excited. They should just replace something. I was like, no. My biggest pet peeve, I've actually brought this up like 4 times in the last week. My biggest pet peeve is when they take something amazing, like Maelstrom, and then they get rid of Maelstrom and they bring in Frozen Ever After. Because I love Frozen Ever After. I think it's a great attraction. However, they both could have existed. There's so much land at Walt Disney World that I don't like the idea of let's get rid of something and replace it with something else, when in reality it's like, oh, we've got enough land that let's just build something new and have it so not only do we have one thing, but now we've got 2. I think that would be, very beneficial. So I'm extremely excited for things like this, like the Big Thunder Mountain Railroad project, or Beyond the Big Thunder Mountain Railroad project, because I feel like it's something new. It's a new land. It's like when they did New Fantasyland. Such a cool idea of having it so we're just expanding the park instead of taking something away from the park and then replacing it with something completely different. But so many people I talk to are always like, oh no, it's so cool. Like they should replace this with this. No, stop putting that out there. Instead, it should be, let's build new things and keep the things that already exist. We can update those things with new details or new technology and stuff, but that's my little rant that I go on quite often. You should bring back after parties once a couple of months. Those were so fun. A lot of people don't remember those. Those were fun. The only problem with after parties is because of how YouTube is, we would have to shut it off and then start over, or unless we just did, I don't know. I do like the after parties. Those were always a lot of fun. Okay, any other questions? I'm gonna think about that, Eric. I'm gonna try to figure out a way how that we can do that. Sometime in the near future, even if that was just a Patreon perk. If we just go live on the Patreon page. Any other questions out there? or should we be wrapping this up? We're also that's a big number. There's a chance that tomorrow when I wake up we'll be at 5.1K. Okay, but let's wrap this up. As always, tonight's episode was sponsored by that's the wrong thing. Our Patreon pals. Patreon pals. They are all very awesome. Thank you to our Patreon pals for sponsoring that. Again, if you are a Patreon pal in the chat room right now, give us an oh yeah. Thank you everyone for joining us tonight. We have a few new people out there tonight, and if you liked this, we will be back next Wednesday as well at 9:30 Eastern time to talk about more Disney stuff. Actually, next week we're going to be going back to our bracket series, which is a lot of fun. So I highly recommend joining us for that if you have not joined us in the past for that. Thank you everyone for joining us, though. I greatly appreciate all of you guys for joining us over here with our 5,000 plus subscribers. It is so cool. I think we're going to hit 6,000 a lot sooner than it took us for 4,000, 5,000, which was 3 months. We might be hitting 6,000 by tomorrow. Probably not. One of my friends, though, does have a deal with her husband that if I hit 6,000 by Friday, she's allowed to come down here so we can celebrate the 6,000 by going to the park together. So if you guys do that, my friend gets a vacation. So, consider sending more of your friends over if you have not done so already. Okay, but thank you everyone for joining us again tonight. As always, remember that anything can happen if you let it. Until next week, have a great week, everybody. Bye-bye. Goodbye now. Goodbye. Bye-bye now. Goodbye. Goodbye now. Are they gone? Are they gone? Oh, good, my cheeks are just killing me. I can't stand this kind of pressure.